It was just another day at the station. I was hunched over my desk, typing up the report from the overnight shift, trying to beat the clock before my coffee cooled off. The usual hum of the office filled the air, chatter among the officers, phones ringing off the hook, printers working tirelessly to keep up with the paperwork. That's when I noticed Officer Morgan. Morgan was one of those guys who seemed to think his badge gave him the right to walk all over everyone. He had this cocky air about him, which always got under my skin. It wasn't confidence. It was the kind of arrogance that made him think he could belittle anyone he chose. I was finishing up my report when I saw him by the door, leaning casually against the frame, smirking like he was in on some private joke. And then I saw her. She was tall, confident, and wore a sharp black blazer that made her stand out. A woman, in her early 40s, she walked with an unmistakable sense of purpose. Her movements were fluid and graceful, but you could tell she wasn't the type to be pushed around. In one hand, she held a sleek black briefcase, and her eyes had a quiet intensity to them that commanded respect. Morgan, of course, didn't see any of that. All he saw was someone who didn't fit the usual profile. Lost or something, he called out to her, stepping right into her path with an overconfident smirk. The woman stopped and met his gaze, her voice steady. "No, I'm here for a meeting." "A meeting?" Morgan repeated, glancing her over as if she wasn't worthy of his time. "This is a police station, not a law office. You sure you're not looking for the town hall?" I froze. Everyone knew Morgan had a temper, but this felt different. This felt personal. The woman didn't flinch. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Morgan chuckled under his breath, clearly not picking up on the situation. "Right, so what's the meeting about? Going to file a complaint? Or did you come to offer free food?" I could feel my frustration rising. The woman remained unbothered, yet the tension was thick in the room. "I'm here for work," she said calmly, adjusting her briefcase as if this conversation was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "Work?" Morgan repeated, mocking her tone. "Well, the break room's through that door. Maybe you could hand out some snacks while you're here." I could feel my blood boiling. Part of me wanted to stand up and tell him off, but she didn't need anyone to defend her. She just stood there composed. Then, with a slight tilt of her head, she asked, "What's your name, officer?" Morgan grinned, thinking he had the upper hand. "What? You gonna write me up or something?" "It's Morgan," he replied, still too proud for his own good. She studied him for a moment. Then, a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Thank you, Officer Morgan. I'll make sure to remember that." Before Morgan could say anything else, a young officer, Davis, came rushing down the hall. He froze when he saw her. "Director Simmons," Davis said sharply, saluting immediately. The room went silent. Morgan's face went pale, his cocky expression slipping away in an instant. "That's right," Davis added, his voice now firm. "She's the new director of our precinct." The silence that followed was deafening. Morgan stammered, trying to apologize, but Director Simmons raised her hand to silence him. "Officer Morgan," she said, her tone authoritative but calm. "Why don't we step into my office? I believe we need to have a conversation." Morgan nodded quickly, the bravado evaporating as he followed her down the hallway. I didn't know what happened in that meeting, but when Morgan came back out an hour later, he looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by an uneasy quietness. Word spread quickly. Director Simmons wasn't just another cop. She was someone who had earned every step of her rise to the top. She had spent years working her way up, breaking down walls along the way, and now she was the first woman of color to lead our precinct. Her reputation was built on fairness, but also on strength. That evening, I had a chance to speak with her briefly. "Director Simmons," I began, offering a small nod. "I just wanted to say how glad I am you're here." She smiled, her sharp, professional demeanor softening for a moment. "Thank you," she replied. "I'm looking forward to working with everyone here." Curious, I hesitated before asking. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you stay so calm with Morgan? I mean, the way he treated you." She paused for a moment, her expression thoughtful. She said slowly, "People like Morgan have been around my whole career. If I reacted every time someone tried to undermine me, I'd never get anything done. The best response sometimes isn't to argue back, but to let your actions speak louder than their words." Her words stuck with me. It wasn't just her response. It was the way she carried herself. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She just stood firm in her convictions. Over the next few weeks, things changed around the precinct. Director Simmons implemented a new focus on accountability and respect in all aspects of our work. She made it clear that discrimination had no place here. As for Morgan, he was suspended and ordered to take sensitivity training. When he returned, he was quieter, more reserved. He never seemed to have the same cocky confidence again, though whether he truly changed, I couldn't say. One thing was clear: he kept his distance from Director Simmons. Looking back, that day wasn't just about Morgan's embarrassing moment. It was about something bigger, a reminder that change is possible, even in places that seem resistant to it. Director Simmons didn't just earn our respect, she earned our admiration. She showed us what real strength looks like, not through shouting or demanding respect, but through quiet determination and resilience. As I sat back at my desk that day, watching everything unfold, I realized something important. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to simply know your own worth and never let anyone make you doubt it. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of Director Simmons' arrival became undeniable. The precinct was no longer just a place of routine. It became a hub of transformation. Her leadership was a quiet revolution, shifting the focus from old, outdated mindsets to a more inclusive, forward-thinking approach. Officers who once operated out of fear or complacency now began to understand the importance of respect, integrity, and personal responsibility in their everyday actions. She didn't just implement policies, she changed the culture. What stuck with me most about Director Simmons was her ability to stand firm in her principles without ever needing to raise her voice. She never sought attention, but her presence demanded it. It was the kind of leadership that wasn't about exerting power over others, but about inspiring those around her to be better versions of themselves. She led by example, showing us that real strength comes from within, from the ability to face challenges head-on without compromising one's values. As for Officer Morgan, though his arrogance never fully vanished, he was no longer the same man who had dismissed her that first day. His eyes had been opened, not by force, but by the realization that his behavior would no longer be tolerated. And perhaps, in that subtle shift, he began to understand what true respect meant, not just for others, but for himself. In the end, that day wasn't just about the confrontation in the hall or the transformation of one officer. It was about the lasting change that Director Simmons had sparked, not just within the precinct, but within each of us. She reminded us that leadership is about more than a title. It's about the courage to stand up, the strength to remain true to your principles, and the wisdom to inspire others to follow suit. Through her, we learned that change, when led with purpose, can be both powerful and lasting.